So the message, stargazing, I kind of wonder, I'm not sure why. I guess I came up with that because I do like the stars, and this hellfire brimstone message of Jesus, this apocalyptic language of watching the sun and the moon and the stars, certainly captures my curiosity and my imagination. But Irene, do you mind me sharing that little story that you shared, unless you want to share it this morning at 9 o'clock? Do you want that story? Want me to do it? So, kind of connects to the stargazing. So, Noreen's always been a bit skeptical, I guess, at times about the whole Bethlehem story. And she and John were living north of Lindsay, and it was summertime, you were telling me. And she was looking up. She knows it was summer. She said she wasn't dressed in real warm clothes, so it was summertime. She looked up in the star, and what was it called again? The Hale-Bopp, one across the sky. And it was something that took her breath away. And a researcher like Noreen is, she ran in to do a little bit research on the Hale-Bopp comet. And lo and behold, it was about 2,000 years ago that it was across the sky. So Noreen at the 9 o'clock service was saying, a lot of people really wonder about the myth of the Christmas story and all that. And it was in that moment, looking up at the stars and her own gazing, that it really sunk home for her. This, as much of the Bible has a lot of myth and story in it, there was a lot of truth that came for her in that moment. So I thank you for that, Noreen. And I have some invitations to offer each of you for Advent that I'm going to have some fun with. I'm going to ask for the next slide. So the first invitation is to tell the truth. So this is a season that we're on a journey. And it's interesting. George mentioned to me this morning before coming into the church that I have to watch my preaching at times. It can cause a little bit of stress even in marriages. My last sermon, I talked about risk-taking. And I'll let him and Wendy talk about that with you afterwards. But I was at Elliott last Sunday, George, the Elliott community, and I was worshiping with him, and I looked out to the congregation, picking up on that theme of risk, and I said, is anybody here like to risk sharing a risk that you've taken in life? And go straight up, Lois Tosh. Lois, sharp as a tack, shouts out, if you're talking about risk, I think it all begins with marriage. That's the biggest risk. Elwood was sitting right next to her. Jack Alex was the next to speak, retired professor, and he spoke about a fabulous risk of traveling to Sierra Leone and, a Saskatchewan boy heading off to another part of the world. The truth of the matter, though, is telling the truth can be risky. Of course it can be. But be conscious of truth in this season. My wife is not a talker. She's an introvert. So I do most of the talking, but I'm become very aware that sometimes silence tells all the truth. And I'll give you an example. Before she went to Iqaluit, she'd say, I'm not really sure everyone I'm going to go. I really like Dr. Zettel. I'm not sure. I wish you were coming, and it would be nice. You'd like to do this kind of thing. And, I don't know. And then she went, time of her life. She comes back. Talking about this nurse from Comox, BC, this nurse from Toronto. She hasn't once said, are you coming back with me? You're going to go with me. The complete truth is she does not want me going up with her. She's found her friends. And everybody in Iqaluit talks to each other too. And she discovered very quickly the truth is that no judgment on a culture that lives a very different kind of life. And she can tell you more about that. But that the truth of the matter is they were very grateful for the work that all of them did in her week there. So second invitation, you can work on the truth, to yearn. So in this season of Advent, it is a time to yearn and to ask deeply, what is it that your soul is yearning for in this journey? I've told you about a daughter settling into Owen Sound, and some days she's going, this sure ain't Burlington, and she's adjusting to life as a teacher in Walkerton. But I just want to share a little good news. Her boyfriend that she's adored and been with for 5 years, he he graduated from chiropractic school in New York State yesterday. So she sent me, my daughter always sends me a message at church time, but she sent me a picture of him graduating. And I think as they begin life in Owen Sound, she's been yearning for this. He's worked very hard to become a chiropractor. So blessings to them. So I ask you, what are you yearning for? And I ask that of myself. What do you yearn for? Another invitation. Invitation to wait. I do not like to wait. I do not like, honestly, I do not like self-checkout lines either, because I like to talk to people who are serving me. But if there's a line, I'll probably go to self-checkout, because I hate waiting. It's, you want to talk to the person, and then if you're in these Sobeys now and they ask for your ID, it's really exciting now. They're asking for my ID and I'm 55. It's like, really, But, when it comes to waiting, it is an interesting, I do discover that I get a little better in this season. As much as I hate to wait, it teaches me something about just slowing down. And, as I've mentioned probably before, as a young minister, I'm surprised at 30 years of age I wasn't taking a heart attack, because I would put a list of people I had to see before Christmas Eve, and it didn't matter how exhausted I was. It was like, darn it, I'm gonna see all these people before Christmas. I had this to-do list that was ridiculous, and it took me a lot of years to figure that one out. I still remember with a wife working at KW Hospital eons ago, and she was in palliative care nursing, and they were calling up. It happened to be a priest at the time, because somebody was really sick, and it was just about Christmas time. And the priest had enough truth and courage to actually say, it made my wife mad as hell. The priest said, "Don't you know what time of year it is? It's Christmas. You have to wait for these things." And a lot of truth of that, though, is it is a busy time. So it's funny, this past week, Personnel Committee had our staff for a nice Christmas lunch, Boathouse, and then the Guelph General had chaplains over at the symposium on Thursday. I said to people, I've had all my Christmas parties and it's not even December 1st. So waiting is, there's something to be learned from waiting. And I have a dear friend right now whose husband's had a very horrific accident, happened a month ago. And he bicycles 5,000 last summer. He's the most fit 65-year-old I know, and with a traumatic fall, cutting some tree limbs, he's become paralyzed. And I went to see Larry the other week, and he is exact personality, his humor, everything is the same, but his body no longer does what it used to. And of course, we pray that somehow he has one arm to use right now so he still can communicate. But he's teaching me, and that family, is how life changes in a second. And when I become impatient, I need to really remember how people wait who are hungry, people wait who are lonely. What's the next invitation? The invitation to notice. And there's something really wise about this. Some of the great psychotherapists have often said, in counseling, and I've heard this over and over again, one of the most important things that human beings can do is just to look outside your window sometimes, look up in the sky, take notice. You might go to the mall. You might just sit there and take notice. So it's easy for me to do, because I go over our no frills, and I take my golden retriever. My partner goes in, and 5 minutes is 30 minutes. So I do a lot of standing outside with the dog. And I have a 100-pounder, and this golden retriever, everyone wants to come and greet. And Friday night, I'm noticing something. 3 people greeted me. All 3 of them were grieving the death of a dog in the last year. And almost tears in their eyes, expressing how much they miss their dog, how they're not ready for a dog. And I just took notice of that, of course, if I stood there, they'd never come near me alone, but they come near me because I have a dog that's quite gentle and big. Take notice in this world, my friends. And what's the last one? I think I got one more. Imagine. One of my favorite ones. And I wouldn't say I'm the most imaginative person. I'd give that more to the Reverend Gail Lynn, but imagination is a beautiful gift this time of year. And I think there's something about the beauty of this sanctuary that so much of life can be at times just routine and rote, and whether you're doing the same job. I picked up the business section of Globe this weekend, and you got dairy farmers irate, and you got poor people in Alberta stressed about oil. You've got French Ontarians worried about education. The list goes on and on about the worries in life. And we do need to imagine a little more deeply so we don't get so hung up with worry. And so I want to close with this. I remember a professor I really enjoyed at the University of Toronto. He was a Catholic professor, and he said to us back in the 80s, you have to read more of Teilhard de Chardin, a Catholic theologian who shook the Catholic Church because he started talking about the universal Christ. And my readings of Teilhard de Chardin was that he was a scientist theologian. He had an imagination. And I'd like to close with this for this Advent Sunday. And this is thoughts of Teilhard de Chardin. And he was, by the way, 1850s to 1940. So we're talking, a good little while ago. What if we miss the point, he says, of who Christ is? What Christ is and where Christ is. And he says, I believe that a Christian is simply one who has learned to see Christ everywhere. Understanding the universal or cosmic Christ can change the way we relate to creation and to all people. In other words, I remember my professor saying this. For Teilhard de Chardin, the cosmic Christ was Christ was the Big Bang that started everything. And Christ is who we wait for and long for. And we see Christ in everyone when we embrace the God who created us all. Thanks be to God.